If the Minnesota Timberwolves are going to run it back next season with just Nickeil Alexander-Walker leaving in free agency, Terrence Shannon Jr. is probably going to be a legitimately important part of their rotation. By not making any additions in free agency or the trade market, all of a sudden Shannon Jr. goes from a rookie who didn't get enough minutes considering he's already 24 years old, to someone who the Wolves are probably going to have to rely on as an offensive spark plug next season. Now, losing a reliable 3-and-D role player like Alexander Walker is going to hurt for the Wolves, and Shannon Jr. isn't the level of defender or shooter that the player he's replacing is, but there are ways that this super athletic, ready-made scorer can bring different dimensions into Minnesota's offense that could really help them next season. I think when you picture Terrence Shannon Jr. right now, you picture him in transition. He's lightning fast with and without the ball for someone his size, he pushes pace consistently, and he's already really strong at the rim as a finisher on both dunks and layups. In general, that's just something the Wolves really need. They scored just 13.4% of their points in transition last season, which was the 4th worst mark in the league, and Shannon Jr. immediately helps that if he's playing legit minutes. Just over 30% of Shannon's field goal attempts came in transition last season, which is almost double the frequency of any other regular rotation member for Minnesota. And as you can see here, he's generating more points per minute on a much higher efficiency when you compare him with other pace pushers in last season's rotation. If Minnesota inject this type of transition animal into their game style, I think it's going to feel like a bolt of lightning that they just didn't previously have. Now, the most interesting part of Shannon's transition game is how often he creates these transition opportunities that aren't usually there for this slow-paced team. Like when the Lakers here have all 5 players in the front court, he's able to zero in on that potential drive-in lane and turn these possessions into easy points. That feels different to just converting fast break points. If you can convert this defensive outlook in the backcourt and then even this defensive outlook in the front court into a layup, that's something worth cherishing as an offense, especially this snail's pace Wolves offense. Again, while everyone else on this team is prone to jogging into the half court, he's sprinting flanks, punching these gaps against half-set defenses, and generating better looks for a team who actually ranked dead last in transition attempts coming off missed shots. The best teams in the league have this same lever, and they pull it constantly. Transition points are the most efficient in the game, and dropping this Terrence Shannon Jr. powder keg into the mix should help Minnesota feel a little more modern in their offensive approach next season. That is still only a fraction of the offensive side of the ball though, and more than 80% of scoring is going to be done in half-court situations on any given night. Where Shannon impacts there is that he's a pretty insane gravity eater right now. He's going to have a reliable weapon to wield in the half court, and I think being able to convert off the scoring gravity of others is going to be that weapon. Like anytime a defense shades off him as a nail helper or just in the gaps, Shannon is going to be a powerhouse getting downhill off the catch, and this is a super valuable trait to have in a half-court setting. Even if it's just a defender shifting over to tag the roll man, that's all the space he needs to blow by closeouts and get into his comfort zone in the paint. These are every possession kind of defensive rotations he's punishing, like the strong side helper digging in here off the corner, and he makes it look fairly routine to just pounce on those advantages and turn them into rim pressure. Now, where this can become really influential within Minnesota's offense is when they can pair this gravity-eating, scoring kind of style with a gravity-creating machine like Anthony Edwards. If Shannon can punish defenses throwing these crazy doubles at Ant, then he immediately becomes a critical piece into Minnesota's offense. I think it'd be wise for Minnesota to keep Shannon one pass away from Ant, where his man in heavy gap help here actually creates really easy offense for both Ant and Shannon together. Minnesota just didn't have that type of player who could punish a defense for loading up here in the gaps on Anthony Edwards last season. They had shooters, but nobody who could hit the seams in a defense like a freight train and really exploit these over aggressive defenses. That does mean he will need to be able to make threes as well though, especially if he's replacing Alexander Walker, who was a really reliable catch and shoot presence for Minnesota over the past 2 seasons. Shannon isn't a non-shooter by any means, but he's going to have to bump up his 34.6% clip on catch and shoot threes as he gets more comfortable playing in this league. He's always going to butter his bread as a downhill force, but being able to knock down threes will give him more lineup versatility and force defenders to close out harder on him and give him those creases in the defense to attack. And again, that's always going to be doubly true when it comes to playing next to Anthony Edwards. Ant is always going to draw these helpers, and whoever is playing one pass away needs to have that jumper down pat as well as that driving game. That's kind of going to be the swing skill for Shannon Jr. If he can't make threes, especially off Ant's gravity, he might be too reliant on being that downhill force, but if he does make his long range shots, there's a really good chance he can hit a pretty high ceiling as a scorer and a complementary piece on a really good team. That should probably be enough for him to be effective right away next season as he steps into bigger minutes, but there's probably still some potential there for him to get involved in some actions offensively as well to really maximize his ability to get downhill. We got flashes of him coming off corner pin downs and being able to draw in defenses and make plays for others inside the arc. I'm not sure how much that playmaking potential is there, but again, having some of that in the bag will raise his ceiling and make him more viable as an option with the ball in his hands. What I think we are going to see a lot of next season is Shannon Jr. in split actions, where the play is centralized around this high post hub, and Shannon receives this away screen so he can curl off the split and get that runway to the rim. That's a play that Coach Finch specifically implemented for Shannon last season, despite the limited minutes we saw of him. We got to see him blasting bigger defenders out of his way, the more finesse touch on some floaters, and even some of that same passing range that he showed coming off those pin downs. Again, we're going to see more of this next season, and it's going to be a nice way to inject Shannon into the game when he isn't eating off those transition bursts or catch and go buckets. There's going to be minutes there next season for Terrence Shannon Jr. That's just the reality for this Minnesota roster right now, and with his blend of athleticism and attack mentality, I think he might even add something to this team right away that they were lacking last season. If you enjoyed this breakdown, you can support Howls and Growls in the links below. If not, you can always like this video or subscribe to the channel to see more breakdowns like this one. Thanks again for watching.